All right, welcome everybody to the second day of this developing exchange for knowledge in ecosystems under the 3-day Bloomsbury SET conference this week. Welcome to this second session. The sessions is being recorded and will be available on the Bloomsbury SET website after the event. Please do sign up for the other sessions. There's one more session tomorrow, very exciting and complementary to the one today and yesterday. The format of the session is we'll have 3 presentations and then a panel discussion. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat box, and then we'll try to handle them into the panel discussions and the open free questions at the end of the session. This whole session will last for about 1.5 hours, and we'll record all your questions and answer them as well as we can. So please don't forget to put your questions in the chat box. Today's session is really focusing on the knowledge of exchange of knowledge between academia, to industry partners, but also to other stakeholders, to move that knowledge and develop products and services and innovations and get them into the market. How do you do that? To partner with industry. I had a mixed career myself. I worked for 15 years as an academic researcher, leading research groups in the laboratory and working with industry from the academic side. And then about 25 years ago, I switched to the private sector, where actually I took the knowledge of the academic partners and tried to develop products and services and develop solutions for health and for patients and animals. And if we do this, we need to build up a sustainable partnership with industry and other stakeholders. It's not a one-off event. To do that, you need trust. You need to understand each other's roles. You need to understand each other's language. So communication and trust and building a structure in your partnership is really important. And in the 3 presentations we will see, we will have 3 different views on these aspects. So we'll talk about academic perspective with Dr. Virginia Marugan, and we'll have a talk from Dr. Beth Bruton from the industry perspective, and another talk from the industry perspective, but rather more focused on market and other stakeholders from Dr. Eduardo Pontes. So 3 views, 3 different perspectives, and I hope this will be a very rich panel, a good learning for all of us. So without further ado, may I introduce you Dr. Virginia Marugan Hernandez, the first speaker. She is a senior research fellow at the Royal Veterinary College in the UK, focused on vaccination studies. She did her PhD in Universidad Complutense in Madrid 10 years ago. Then she went for a postdoc, and since 2017, a research fellow at the Research Veterinary College. She's very much focused on the molecular and cellular biology of parasites, developing diagnostic tests, vaccines, and discovery of new therapeutic targets. Over to you, Virginia.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well, I guess? Okay, so thank you very much, Frank, for the nice introduction. And I want to thank also the Bloomsbury SET team, especially Sarah Rhodes, for organizing this and invite me here today. So as Frank introduced me, and not much more, so it's just Virginia Marugan Hernandez, and I'm a senior research fellow at the Royal Veterinary College. So the Royal Veterinary College is part of the University of London and is a veterinary school providing teaching, undergraduate and postgraduate teaching in veterinary medicine, nursing, and bioscience. ARVIS is also a leading institution in veterinary research and has ranked top 1 in the QS University World Ranking in 2019 and again this year. We have very good animal facilities and labs. We're under development to create new facilities. So yeah, we have quite a lot of focus in research. And I'm here today to talk about our own Bloomsbury SET experience in terms of partnership. Next. So the first thing I'm going to talk is about the elements needed to create a sustainable partnership with the industry. And next. So the first element is a problem to solve. So we need a problem to solve to start with this interaction. I draft here what will be a knowledge exchange ecosystem, including an external part that would be the public market, an industrial partner, and an academic partner. They all will work together to try to solve this problem. I think a very easy way to illustrate this now, how this could work, is the current pandemic, in which there is an external need, like people really need a solution to the problem. And then industry and academia have been working together in providing more knowledge of the disease and providing vaccines and medicines. So that would be a good example for it. Next slide. So in our particular case, this ecosystem will involve as external part the poultry industry, in particular infectious diseases. So the poultry is developing a lot at the moment to provide enough food for people worldwide, and is under the threat of many endemic and emerging diseases. So we need solutions for that. It's a constant problem to solve in this situation. Then as a partner, we have MSD Animal Health. This is a big pharma company that provides many solutions and products to the poultry industry in terms of diseases. But as always, there will be some products that will need to be improved because they're expensive or suboptimal, or new diseases that we need to solve. And the third part of this, the third player will be us, the RBC, in partnership with the London School of High-End and Tropical Medicine. So we have quite a lot of background knowledge in infectious diseases. And for this particular project, we have a multivalent vector that we thought could be a good alternative for as a vaccine. Next. So the next element that I consider very important will be the opportunity. So we have a problem to solve, but we need an opportunity to start to work all together to sort it out. And this is when Bloomsbury said come into play. So providing funding to have the opportunity to start interactions and work together to solve a problem is critical. Next, please. And the third element I consider very important too, critical, is the communication between the partners. So the communication since the beginning to see that we are on the same page and we want to solve the same problem and move in the same direction. And yesterday, if you attended to the session, there was a lot of talk about developing trust. So this communication is critical to develop this trust. Next, please. So in this particular partnership was initiated from us, from the RBC, and I would say the main driver was achieving something real. As a researcher for many years in a specific area related to vaccine development, I think it's quite frustrating that, for example, it's been 30 years in research on recombinant vaccines, and none of them have reached the market. And the old classical live vaccines and drugs that has developed many resistance at the moment are still the main ways of treating many diseases. So I think that there's something that we need the feeling of moving on and really achieve something from all these research and papers published. I think a partnership is also important to find complementary expertise. Working with the London School of High-End Tropical Medicine and MSD Animal Health, we can cover our weakness or gaps. Similarly, like having access to new resources, we will be able to get new molecular tools and animal models. And that will help us a lot to understand the wider picture of the problem, because we can have our view from the academia, but it's very good to understand how really the industry think or they see the problem. And of course, this partnership could allow many new opportunities for funding to continue this research so things don't get stuck again on just publications. Next slide, please. So the second part I want to talk about is about successes and failures of this knowledge exchange ecosystem with the industry in our particular project. Next, please. And starting with the success, I think it's been very good that we have achieved quite a lot of progression in the development that we plan. But as good as this, I think is that we have managed to create a very strong partnership. We have managed to develop that trust that the panel yesterday talked about a lot. And this is also very important and one of the aims, I guess, from the Bloomsbury set. We all feel there's been a lot of learning. So every session, every meeting, we went through a lot of brainstorming. It was challenging, like all the experimental designs had to be well explained. Everybody wanted to understand why and how we were doing things. So that's been really good too. We have generated new resources and knowledge in terms of molecular tools and understand a bit better some mechanisms, like particular things in the project. I can say also we got new talents into the team. So luckily, the staff that was recruited for the project in both institutions, RBC and the London School, they're likely going to stay a bit longer, which is something very good. And this project has been also very good for some of us that we were early career researchers to establish a bit better. And we all aim for a long-term collaboration. We're exploring routes now to see how we can continue this line of research and maybe open new ones, or the three partners. So that's something very good too. Next slide, please. And the challenge of failures, I would say just failures, probably more challenging, of course. COVID-19 had an impact because it's a very lab-based project. But at the same time, it's difficult. I think it's difficult to know what is pure COVID-19, or we will have faced those problems without COVID too. So it's diluting a bit any other problem. We all blame COVID-19. One of the things that we have run out a bit on time. We have a bit slow starting, then obviously the lockdown, we still have some restrictions to access the labs. So obviously, and only 1 month extension, that does definitely impact a bit, not completing the objective. But I would say still we managed to do most of the work, but it's very good. And again, typical classical difficulties with experimental approaches, experiments that don't work first time, some issues that we need to use the backup plans, but that's always, I think in my experience, always happen in a project. And another challenging thing has been the communication that's become exclusively remote. Luckily, the pandemic didn't hit until we were halfway of the project. So during the first year, for example, with our partners at the London School, we managed to have many meetings, and that helps a lot, I think, to develop this trust. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to travel to Netherlands to meet our partners, MSD, or put the whole team together. And this is something I think the communication has still worked well, but it's definitely not the same. And the other challenge has been Brexit. Again, luckily, it's been very at the end of our project. But we've been every December trying to stock up because we didn't know what's going to happen or no. And now it seems really difficult to post materials to Europe, really expensive. So also affects a bit. Next slide, please. And as last part of my talk is related to the cultural clash between higher education institutes and industry in this knowledge exchange ecosystem. Next slide. So this clash, they different, you can easily notice different ways of doing things. I think we follow a bit of a different pace. Industry they need to achieve results and develop products. I feel in academia, we want to achieve results, but we tend to do more thought out approaches in which we want to, not just the results, it's just why that's happening and how. Is another way, is another difficulty, but difference is working under confidentiality agreement. As a scientist, you go to conference, you tend to share a lot your findings and try to make questions and give answers. And now you need to be careful what you share. So it'd be a different way of working, similar for approvals for interactions, or attending to conferences, need approval, or depends what you want to, you just need to work with these approvals, and that might change a bit your deadlines to when things need to be ready to get these approvals. And so I think also administrative offices work a bit of two different pace. Obviously, MSD is a very big company and they very specialize in this type of collaboration. But I also think the university tends more and more to work in this knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange, and it's becoming much easier now, I think. But there's still a difference in the focus of the departments, the amount of people working on them. Again, we work with collaboration agreements for intellectual property protection. There's a lot of discussion on this part that usually you don't have when you just work collaborating within your institution or other universities. I haven't seen I didn't know before how complicated it can get. And then finally, all these confidentiality agreements and IPs can affect your publications. In academia at the moment, publications are one of the most important things you need to get. I think this is also something that is going to be changing over the few years. Like knowledge exchange it's going to have a value even if it doesn't produce any publication, but produce patents or other stuff. Same for conferences. All the results are a bit affected by this collaboration. But I think these things are challenging, but I think it's really worth to get all this in place and establish a good partnership and make things move on with our results in science. And this is all for my part. Next slide. So, thank you all of you for listening. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we will discuss all later. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginia, for being perfect on time, very, very focused, and a rich presentation. That's very good. You mentioned several points here, really problem solving, which is inherent to academic research, finding out what is the problem, what are the aspects, what are possible solutions, but also communication, trust, which are related to the soft skills and the soft elements that I mentioned in my introduction. We'll come back to that later. Thirdly, you mentioned that don't do this alone. To actually develop a knowledge ecosystem, you need complementary partners. One of those is MSD. As you mentioned several times, you have a working relationship with MSD, and that gives me the perfect opportunity to introduce the next speaker, which is Dr. Beth Bruton. She is an associate project leader in MSD Animal Health in the Netherlands, based in the Netherlands. She worked with Schering-Plough poultry vaccines for a number of years. She had a doctoral degree 9 years ago at the Royal Veterinary College, so coming from the same stables, moving to the private sector. And she's very much focused on genetic tools, functional genome analysis of mycoplasmas and poultry vaccine development. I'm very much looking forward to hear more. Dr. Beth Bruton, please.
Great. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for that introduction, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to talk today. So following that nice introduction, I'm Beth Bruton and I'm Associate Project Leader within MSD Animal Health, working on the development of poultry vaccines. So this was actually one of the first collaboration projects I've been involved with. So I've had lots of learnings along the way, and it's been really really enjoyable collaboration for me to work on and learn about. So I want to give you a little bit of background about MSD Animal Health. So I'm not sure how much people are aware, but it's a global animal health company, and we really have a strong focus on innovation and the science of healthier animals. And with this strong focus on innovation, it means that collaborations are actually a really important part of this for our company and for developing research and development of new projects. So as a global company, we develop medicines, vaccines, solutions, and digital technology to advance animal health and well-being. And within the poultry vaccine development group, we have 2 R&D site locations, and this is within the USA and the Netherlands, and I'm based in the Netherlands. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So I was asked to think about what are the elements really needed to create a sustainable partnership with industry. And I broke this down really into 4 key elements, with the first one really being, and I think it's been mentioned a lot really throughout this series, a good building a good relationship. And part of this is being able to build a good level of trust with each other. And I think with this level of trust, you can then create the ability to share freely and openly information, which really then builds that strong foundation for a project and a collaboration. And it's also very important to have understanding, and this is understanding of the different cultures. So within industry, we can be very product focused, and we're really driven by market requirements. Whereas I think from the academic side, it can be more research focused with a problem to solve, and then having more room to kind of evolve different ideas. And another key element to a sustainable partnership is having that common interest. And this can be driven really from both sides. So it can be research problem to solve, again, market requirements to think about. And it really then leads into the developing those ideas and the fundamental knowledge around this common interest. And we also recognize that within our company, we don't always just have these expertise. So we have to reach out to academic institutes and the experts in the field to help with these, this knowledge exchange and these collaborations. And another important element is also you've got to have effective planning. So some of these projects can be fairly large with several different partners. So it's really essential to have that planning. So you know where you're all going. You also going back to an understanding of everyone's roles and responsibilities within that project. And this planning has to have workable timelines for both sides, and also to have that level of flexibility, I think is very important. And last but not least, I think communication, and this has been mentioned previously with Virginia's talk, communication is really essential to this sustainable partnership. And this has to be frequent and effective. And you have to be able to feel like you can discuss and have good brainstorming sessions, but also discuss your results, maybe things that aren't going correctly, and not being worried to speak up. Next slide, please. Okay, so thinking about really why is partnership beneficial? So you can think, okay, MSD is such a big global company, surely we can just develop these vaccines on our own, develop these projects on our own. But actually, collaboration is very important. And it's all about the right people and the right expertise. And not just about the project, it's about forming these links and getting being able to form those ideas and that fundamental knowledge. So it's also the sharing of resources. So this can be people, expertise, facilities, equipment. And we don't always have these freely available for all of us to be able to use, but by combining resources, we can really have a successful project. One of the key benefits in a collaboration is the generation of this new fundamental knowledge. And this really leads on to early feasibility, proof of concept studies, which are so based on this fundamental research and knowledge. And this is really often approached best as a collaboration, really generating good results. Another benefit to partnership is being able to share ideas with complementary input from different perspectives. So industry can really put across the market requirements and the needs, whereas academia can really bring that fundamental research and background to solve the problem. One of the difficulties within industry can often be the time to research these fundamental questions. So project work can be very focused within industry and driven by timelines with strict go, no-go decisions. So it's not always allowing the time to research these questions that you have and want to know more about. And the last point here is risk versus output. So as with every project, there's no guarantee of a positive outcome. And therefore, by collaborating, and the risks and benefits can be shared, and they can also lead on to other projects. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So thinking more about the project we've been involved in, and trying to think of the difficulties and challenges we have kind of faced along the way. And one of the main ones for me anyway was the online communication. So just having only online communication can be really challenging sometimes. It can also be very beneficial when you want to have a quick chat with someone, set up a really quick meeting. That's also good. And when you're in different locations, it can be a very useful tool. However, you get technical interruptions, and it can be quite difficult to really brainstorm ideas and have good open discussions, I think. And sometimes, yeah, discussions are just really best done face to face. Another challenge was busy schedules. So having several different partners, trying to get everyone together at the same time, was sometimes a challenge. But I think, yeah, when you enter into these collaborations, you really have to realize that you've got to give time to these things to make them work. So Brexit was also a challenge that we've come across really at the beginning of this year. So for sample transfer, it results in extra paperwork and delays. So this also has to be factored into your timelines. One of the other challenges, I think this hasn't really affected this project, but can be company priorities. So project priorities can change within a company very quickly, and this can then have an effect on booking of facilities and planning studies. So again, this can also affect your timeline. So this is where you've really got to have those flexibility in your planning of your project. Another difficulty was the funding and the hard stop with this funding, and really no possibility to extend. And with the difficulties of Corona, with having to work from home, closing of labs, it was hard to compensate for some time that was lost. So IP and versus publication, this can be a challenge. So obviously IP is very important, I think, to both sides, to both industry and academia. However, companies often want to check publications before they're submitted and presentations, and this can add delays into being able to submit these for publication. So I think that also needs to be discussed and made clear at the start of these projects, so everyone's aware of the different requirements. So next slide, please. Thank you. So thinking about the successes of our project, so we had a very successful collaboration and I was very happy to be a part of it. And we really built a really good relationship with our new collaborators. And I'd met a couple of them, but not all of them before. And despite the difficulties of just online communication, not being able to travel to each other's sites, we were able to build a good relationship, a good level of trust, and an understanding of how we all work. So again, yeah, we had really good communication, really good discussions and brainstorming. And this, resulted in good, interesting scientific results, which is always nice when you enter into these projects. And a lot of this was down just to the strong motivation of the team, with a focus on finishing and completing the project goals. So yeah, it was a very nice collaboration to be involved in. Next slide. Okay. So for me, thinking about, okay, what lessons have I learned from working in this collaboration, and from an industry perspective as well, is that I think, as Virginia mentioned, that the contract terms and requirements, it can be different for both sides, and these can also take time to agree on and put in place. So that again has to be factored in at the start of the project, or even when you first start discussing ideas. These need to be thought of early on. For me, it would have been nice to have a face-to-face kind of kick-off start meeting with all collaborators involved. And I think at the time we started this project, it was a bit difficult to get everyone together, but I think that could have also, been a really good start to the project. Obviously, there's unforeseen difficulties, and I think this has affected everyone worldwide. But these things you don't think about, but maybe in the future you have to think, okay, when you may come across these difficulties, okay, what are going to be the workarounds? How can we still get to our goals and aims of the project? And another lesson was really the delays in the work could not be compensated in terms of additional time on the project, and that was quite difficult, I think, to work around and get to our complete our project. So I think that was it. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Beth, for providing insight from the project management perspective and from the private sector perspective. I noticed that you pounded on the same nails that Virginia said: communication and trust and relationships, which are not really hardcore elements, but they're key to success. Thank you for giving the project management perspective, which is slightly different from exploratory research perspective, but you're really close to the lab, close to the knowledge and development, product development, obviously. For that, it addresses the reason why a project has a certain priority in a private sector industry, because the private sector is more focused on bringing such a product or service or solution to the market. So there's the link to the next speaker. I think the next speaker we have Dr. Eduardo Pontes with a Brazilian background. So he did his studies as a veterinary scientist in Universidade de São Paulo. And then he further studies on strategic management at the State University of Campinas in Brazil. Then moved to Europe. He's currently based in Belgium, very close to where I am here, just outside Brussels, and working in the company Zoetis for animal health. It's a veterinary company, but developing solutions and bringing them to the market. So both R&D as well as distributing projects. He is Associate Director of Research Alliances, which links a bit to go outside the lab and link to the stakeholders in the market. People in the market, how do you distribute your product? Who is paying for it? Who is using it? How do you do your marketing? And is what you have developed in the lab, is it actually also acceptable in the market? So over to you, Eduardo.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. That's exactly right. So in the next 15 minutes or so, I'll try to provide you my take on how we build successful partnerships with the academic partners that we have, and also what are the challenges of bringing research to the next phase as a product candidate, and then taking it into the market as a next step. So next slide, please. I thought about starting with just providing an overview of who is Zoetis, what we do, for those of you who may not be completely familiar with us. So we are a global animal health company, a Fortune 500 company, acting in more than 100 countries worldwide. We have approximately seven major product categories servicing 8 core species. And we provide from medicines and vaccines, so the more traditional pharmaceutical products, to also diagnostics and genetic tests to predict and prevent and detect diseases, as well as biodevices and precision livestock farming solutions to enable farmers to reach their goals. We have a little more than 1,200 scientists in R&D in 5 continents, in our different R&D sites, and nearly 3 times that number of people in the field reaching out to customers and presenting to customers the solutions that we develop in the lab and making sure that they adopt those solutions. So this is an overview about Zoetis. Next slide, please. And without any further delay, I'll jump right into the topic for today. And I thought about starting by trying to answer a very elementary question. And the question is, are collaborations between industry and academia really relevant, and can they provide financial returns? And spoiler alert, the answer to that question is yes, and I'll try to share some light into why I think that. Next slide, please. So these days, it seems like we don't talk about anything else other than COVID-19. I thought it was an interesting example to bring as well. As you all know, we have a very obvious example of a COVID-19 vaccine that is a result of a collaboration between a university and an industry, which is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. But I brought today the mRNA vaccines as another example, and sometimes a hidden example of how a university generated technology actually will lead to innovation and reach the market eventually. So this is a study that was released earlier this year showing the complex network of deals around the mRNA vaccine platforms and how they ended up creating the COVID-19 vaccine candidates or vaccines that are already on the market. You see on the slide, there are 2 universities there. UBC is University of British Columbia, and UPenn is University of Pennsylvania. They were originators of what I will call a background IP, so patents that were the starting point for some of the platforms that were used by some of those companies. And then a subsequent number of deals were connecting the dots here in this map. And highlighting some of the stakeholders that were important for this platform to come to fruition. You have not only the universities, but also biotechs and startups. You have the NIH as a governmental agency. You have the big pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and GSK in this slide. We even have Tesla as an outsider, so a player not really related to this industry, but playing some role in the ecosystem. And the point I wanted to make is that, yes, these collaborations with industry and academia, they are bringing relevant value to society and to the industry in general. But we have to keep in mind that the ecosystem is very diverse. There are other players out there. And even when we are not directly collaborating with universities, we are actually benefiting from outputs coming from universities. So next slide, please. For those of you who like numbers, I also thought I would present some studies showing the economical benefits of those collaborations. And this is a study funded by the Bio organization in Autumn in the US, where they're showing the positive impact in the US economy generated directly by technologies that were transferred in the biotechnology sector from universities to industry, and they ended up being commercialized. And as you can see by the numbers in this slide, hundreds of billions of dollars were added to the US economy throughout those 12 years. They generated hundreds of thousands of new jobs as direct consequence of commercializing products that were originated from technologies produced in universities. And this, in my opinion, this is actually a very conservative model because they're not taking into account all those technologies that did not end up being commercialized, but they might have become research tool or enabling technology inside a company that actually did impact the commercial ability, the ability to commercialize products in the end of the day. Next slide, please. Now, this is all nice and fun, but what about Zoetis? Does Zoetis really have a take on the impact of academic collaborations into our bottom line and into our ability to commercialize products? And again, I want to say the answer is yes. I did that on purpose, that I did not fill out this slide only with universities, just to make the point again that the ecosystem is diverse. We do collaborate a lot with universities, but also with biotechs and startups, sometimes even with leaders in a specific segment, like Abaxis and Pharmac, that were leaders in their segment, and they ended up being acquired by Zoetis at some point. So yes, there is a high impact. To give you some numbers about that as well. Currently, within our R&D pipeline, we estimate that 50% of our active projects, they have some external innovation component attached to it. So 50% is a lot. And again, I am being very conservative, because if we were to consider as well only exchange of know-how or expertise or consultancies, if we were to consider also technologies that were developed in the past and were already implemented into our routine, and that we don't really see them as external technologies anymore, but they were indeed originated from external collaborations. And if we go even further and think about the collaborations that we will have after the product is launched and is already on the market, with outcomes research, for example, is an area where we generate more data after a product is already on the market, then I wonder if we can even really talk about purely internal innovation anymore. I truly believe that, I don't have the numbers, I don't really have an answer for that, but I truly believe that we cannot, in the industry as a whole, I'm not just talking about Zoetis, I don't think we can talk anymore about purely internal innovation. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to agree a lot with what Beth and Virginia already said, and also give you my take on how we can create and sustain strong collaborations and a strong innovation ecosystem. Next slide. And I thought I would start by defining what a good collaboration looks like to us. And like Beth and Virginia already said, we also think that a free flow of ideas and a sense of trust needs to be present. We need to work together as a team and be creative on the ways we collaborate so we can deliver value to both partners. We want our partners to be marching in the same direction as we are. Maybe we have slightly different goals. It's fine as long as we're walking in the same direction, and that direction, in our view, is to create both growth, and generate business in the end of the day. And when I talk about growth, it's not just growth for the industry, it's growth for the academia, it's growth for society in general. Next slide, please. And again, agreeing with my colleagues, there isn't a lot of secret here. We do believe that the ideal partner needs to bring complementary skills and technologies. We already have our own 1,200 scientists, like I said, but out there are 77 million scientists working in different areas. So we do think that there's a lot for us to benefit from collaborations from outside, bringing complementary skills and technologies. We like to have, and we expect our partners to have this mindset of let me help you succeed. So we are not just working for our own benefit, but we are also making compromise sometimes, making sure that everyone sitting around the table gets what they want. We like to be, and we like our partners to be enthusiastic about technology. We are extremely enthusiastic about science as well. But we need to be realistic when partnering and realistic about, for example, data sharing. I think we already mentioned that today. The need to publish data that academics typically have, in contrast with the need to sometimes keep information confidential, at least until we have an IP published, or sometimes even longer than that. So those things need to be balanced out. We need also to be realistic about market size expectations. Sometimes you can have an idea of how big a market is, but that doesn't mean that your industrial partner will be able to tap and access 100% of the market by himself or herself. So we need to be realistic about that. And finally, also realistic about what the technology can in fact deliver, and be careful not to overpromise, because when you overpromise, you have a high risk of under-delivering, and that's only harmful for any collaboration. The last 2 points I want to make is, no, please go back to the last slide. Yeah, so Zoetis is a scientifically driven company. We like to see data to make decisions. And while it's okay to approach a partner with anecdotal data or just some testimonials, it's a conversation starter. It's not really sufficient to start a collaboration in our view. We want to generate scientifically sound data in order to progress the technology further. And if that is not still available, then the collaboration would have the goal to generate such data. So just keeping that in mind. And finally, knowing the priority that each partner has is going to also help you understand where are the points that you can compromise and where are the points that your partner can compromise as well. And that is the segue to the next slide. Now, just finalizing what I wanted to say today before the roundtable, I wanted to show a little bit of what we expect from a collaboration in a research collaboration when we engage with academia. And sometimes there is a misconception that the industry always expects every single collaboration to generate a product to be sold in the market. And that would be great if that was true, but it's actually not realistic. And we don't have that expectation, not even for our internal projects. So that's not really what we expect. From our perspective, what we want from a research collaboration is that it feeds information, technologies, maybe enabling disease models, substrate, whatever it is that it's output, that it is feeding into our pipeline, and then it helps accelerate product development. The technology itself doesn't need to be commercialized as long as it's supporting product development. Yes, there is a product development component there, and we cannot ignore that, but it doesn't mean that every single collaboration needs to become a product in the end. And you see in the bottom of the slide there a risk graph. It's very obvious as well that the risk decreases as we progress with development of a specific technology. But just keep that in mind. We and the technology transfer officers and business developers in this call, they know that very well, that there are many ways of evaluating a technology. One of those ways is calculating NPV. And the risk of a technology failing across the progression of development is taken into account. That means that the higher the risk that a technology presents, the lower the valuation will typically be. So if you take the same technology in a very early research phase, it will have a valuation of X, which is smaller than the same technology when evaluated when it's already on the market. So just keeping that in mind as well, that the future potential value of a technology is not the present value of that technology. And next slide, please. And to wrap up, so these are the 4 things that we look when we're evaluating a potential project, whether it's internal or external. And those are the things that we are looking when we talk to academia, when they present an opportunity to us. The first and most important point is whether or not the technology has importance to our customer. Can it bring value to our customer? Can it solve a problem that our customer has and cares about? If it does, then it obviously needs to be technically feasible. We need to be able to progress with the development, scale it up, and offer the solution to our customer in a cost-effective way. Otherwise, if it's too expensive, the customers will not adopt it, and we will not have a return on investment. And finally, we need to have a high enough commercial value that it generates profits and benefits us, but also enough profits to benefit our partners. And also a little bit of that profit needs to go to the customer again. So just keeping that in mind, those are the 4 things that we would evaluate typically. And of course, the level and the depth of that evaluation varies a lot depending on the stage of a certain technology. If it's very early research, we will not be making a lot of calculations. It's not the point, but we will definitely take the market into account when making the decision. And I'll stop here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. That's a rich presentation, and it's putting a lot of insight in the business development and the further product development into the debate. As I said before, it's one thing to develop something in the lab that actually works, but quite another thing whether it's useful in society, is adopted in the market, and it actually can bring value to society. I like that sentence very much. Value to society, then results also value to the company. And that is driving decisions here. So let me first remind everyone, all the audience here, that we have a chat box. So if you have further questions, please send them in there. We have about 4 or 5 questions trickling in already. So we'll address them in a few minutes. First of all, I would like to wrap up the course of this panel discussion a little bit and put it into a joint level, open discussion with all the panel speakers. If I think of the value chain, a value chain where, as Eduardo mentioned, the risk is high because it's far from the market. Technologies are not fully developed, if not developed but not fully validated. Then you need to pour in academic knowledge to make sure that this is advanced so that it becomes interesting for other partners. That can be industry, but knowledge exchange is broader than technology transfer. And all 3 speakers actually hinted at that, but I would like to stress that, in my mind at least, knowledge exchange is about learning from each other. And learning by exchanging knowledge about consultancy, what works, what doesn't work, knowledge about the market, what is needed there, and see how can we build something that is valuable for society and all the partners together. For that, you need an ecosystem. And in the ecosystem, every single partner has their own role. They're complementary roles: a knowledge provider, a developer of products and technologies, and a distributor, one who is selling the product and making sure it's in the hands of the end customers. Now, in that whole value chain, with the different roles, of course, decisions and priorities are set by each organization in their own strategy. And if we want to build up sustainable partnerships, all 3 speakers actually aligned there, that said there that the interests and the win-win benefits to the organization need to be aligned also. Otherwise, it's a one-off project, and then people split apart again. If you want to have a sustainable long-term partnership, the overall perspectives need to be aligned. In order to align that, of course, you have data exchange, knowledge exchange by learning, by intensively collaborating with each other, but also there are legal requirements. As Beth hinted at, and also Eduardo, there's technology transfer and legal requirements from, if you have a certain piece of valuable knowledge, and you give it to somebody else to take the next step, what are your rights? How do you benefit if it finally ends up in the market? And who owns the data, and what can you do with it, and what can you not do with it? As Virginia mentioned, confidentiality issues play a role, and that's in conflict with the interest of academia to publish. So you need to find a modus vivendi, a procedure from when can you publish, and what can you publish, under which conditions, and how do you publish? And if an industry has a monopoly on a certain technology, how do you make sure that everyone benefits and that this is not restricted to a very small market segment? And that is relevant to the COVID discussions we had about access to vaccines, for example, in Africa. It's a very hot debate now, so this is not theoretical. Mm-hmm. If I think of that, how do you structure a collaboration and make it sustainable on the legal side with these agreements? Beth, what is your experience? What works best? And do you do this alone, or do you get help from others in your organization?
Yeah, so actually this is, a very important part of the collaboration, and that everyone has that understanding of what the results could lead to. And we actually have a legal department and a business development department who are experts in that field. So they advise us. So us as the researchers, we will bring the information to them, and they really advise us on the best routes to go down. But obviously it's finding that balance. So as industry, we don't want to take everything. There's got to be a win-win for everyone out of the project. Otherwise, people wouldn't enter into collaborations. We always have to take advice within our company on these contracts, and it can take time because people do have different ideas and understandings of what needs to be in these. So that's also one of the big discussions that always starts at the start of a project and entering into a collaboration.
Yeah, Eduardo, you also mentioned the value versus the risks, or the benefits in society, but also to the company versus the risks. That I assume that determines how much you're going to pay for contribute into a collaboration. Academia usually gets initial support from grants and subsidies for very high risk knowledge gathering. But then at the point where you collaborate with industry, how do you determine what you're willing to put on the table?
Yeah.
And actually, this relates to one of the questions that are coming in for the tech transfer professionals and business developers that are entering into structuring a partnership.
Okay. Yeah. Let me help you into answering two parts then. So regarding the question that came in about the tech transfer professionals, my view at least is that they are helpers. They are facilitators. In the last few decades, maybe 3 decades, we have seen actually industry and academia, they have learned together to collaborate. We were speaking different languages, and I think business development professionals in the industry side and the tech transfer professionals in the academia side, they were maybe the translators. I think they learned, first of all, to talk to each other and then translate the conversation into their research teams. And I think they are a key component to making this work. Now, how do we determine the value split? I'll call it that. It's an interesting conversation, and it needs to be an open conversation, in my opinion. Typically, the way we work is that we are very open about our perception of the market value, and we are very open about the split that we think universities and our customers and ourselves need to have. We also tend to split when certain payments are made in order to balance with the risk. So the industry will always tend to have a preference for later payments because that's when the risk is lower. But of course, we also understand that it's not always possible. University obviously need the fund right now in order to make research. So we need to counterbalance that and then compromise and make sure that we meet everyone's needs. So this is more or less how we do it. In the end of the day, it depends on how early or how late a technology is and how much each of the partners is contributing to making the way from an idea to a product in the market.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a general remark. Specifically in your, and this is a question to both Eduardo and Virginia, in a way. In your experience, who is taking the lead in setting up the collaboration? Is it academia, or is it really driven from the need and the demands from industry? And what is the best way to start?
Beth, do you want to?
Virginia,
yeah.
Well, yeah. No, but you mean more, it depends what is the, I would say the research idea or the development works a bit different to what is the collaboration agreement in terms of legal things, protection. So I think in this case, because Bloomsbury said involved like RBC, London, like different 4 institutions from London, we started out like where we could, what idea we could take forward to this knowledge exchange program. As I mentioned, we had something that we actually collaborated in the past a bit. As MSD before, when they were in the UK, they were a bit involved in some of these ideas. So it's something that now we wanted to move forward. And that's how the collaboration started. Like contact again, like remember like this idea, we want to move this forward. We have developed quite a lot of proof of principle and you want to go like for more. And this involved a lot of meetings, well, 2, 3, but like really to put the project together to make MSD come on board with it. Like we really need to work hard and show that it was possible or a really solid idea, they could work on it. So we actually, I think the side of MSD took care of, be sure that if they were getting involved, they convinced that, like we can convince them that we can do something with it and that we are the adequate people.
Yeah, I guess maybe I need to be a bit more clear in my question. There are 2 ways, at least in my experience, there are at least two ways of initiating collaboration. Either it's driven from academia because you have something new, you have developed something new, and it could be valuable for industry. So you approach several different industry partners and see who is the best match, and then you create a product. There could be another way of initiating strategic collaborations, and that is several organizations in an ecosystem are in contact with each other. They see a market need for a certain challenge, for a certain product, and together you investigate several different options to actually address that market need. That is a market pull instead of a technology or knowledge push. And I was interested from how do you see what works best for you, or both, or is there a third way?
I can attest.
Yes, Eduardo, please.
So
that's good.
I think both, Frank. Of course, the market pull is very relevant. And if there is a disconnect between what the technology can offer and what the market needs, then there is no way forward. But sometimes markets, they don't know that they need something. It happens. We have Apple as the big example. We didn't know we needed iPhones until they were there. I think we have to be flexible as well, and we tend to look everything with an open mind. Sometimes the technology, it's even hard for us to understand what a technology can actually deliver because there isn't anything out there doing the same. And I think that academia, they help us understand that, and this is what Virginia was also saying, that sometimes there's a little bit of convincing work that needs to be done in order to show to industry, well, this can be valuable to you in this or that way. But definitely, we need to envision at some point that the market will want to adopt it. So I think it's both ways. The project that we initiate from a clear customer need, they tend to be much more focused and have, let's say, a more lean way to proceed because we know what we want, we have a product profile, and we know what to develop. And Beth will certainly agree with that, I think.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it's also okay to be a little more open-minded and maybe answer some questions that we don't know exactly where they will lead. Yeah, but if I had to say, most of our projects and most of our collaborations, they do have a very strong market pool.
Obviously. Which leads me to another question, maybe first Virginia and then Beth. Do you think that there are sufficient skills in your organization in the support offices, thinking of the research management grant support office to write a good grant and be successful in obtaining subsidies, and the technology or industry liaison office to build these relationships with industry in a long-term sustainable way instead of just one-off contract research agreements? Virginia?
Yeah, I think that it's changing quite a lot. I think university has been very focused on public funding, like the classical grants to specific funding bodies. But I mean, I also fairly new on this, but I have the feeling it's progressing a lot to understand better all this knowledge exchange ecosystem, like what this Bloomsbury said. We have other knowledge exchange calls now with a bit of public funding by involving industry. And I think at the RVC, I'm quite in contact with people in the research office, and seems to be getting much better on setting this contract, try to speed up the processes, because sometimes if the process is very low, you can lose a collaboration with the industry. So I think the university is valuing also the importance of these projects. Like, I think it's moving towards this direction, try to encourage more this type of.
The reason why I'm asking is actually when I think of 30, 40 years back, the experience in research management and technology transfer offices in academia was like, we have knowledge, anyone who pays for it can have it. I put it very bluntly.
Yes,
or here's a contract research, you pay us our fees and you do whatever you like. But that's not a sustainable partnership where equal knowledge exchange happens. And I think in the last 30 years, a lot has changed. Eduardo mentioned Autumn, AUTM in the US. We have a similar organization, ASTP, Proton Europe in Europe. And for research managers, I used to be the president chair of the European Association for Research and Innovation Managers. So these support organizations help to build up a professional knowledge, how to support knowledge exchange. Because as an academic, we're not trained in that. And if you're coming from market research in industry, you're not necessarily trained to understand the risks of academic research either. So it's two cultures, but also the skills necessary to Beth, what would be your experience in that?
Yeah, so I think within MSD, we're very lucky, and we have a really good legal department that really supports us in our business development department. So we've got a really good support network for setting up these collaborations. So yeah, that really helps us because within R&D we're also scientists, so we're not really experts within these fields, and we're always learning. So we do have that support, which is very good. So yeah, we feel that, and often we need to bring together the academic business developer team with our team so that they can have those discussions, so we're not so much in the middle of this, but they can have those discussions about the contracts.
And Beth, there's another related question in the chat box that is coming in here. There's several of you, all three, mentioned the time pressures. As in the industry, you're very focused, time is money, you need to move a product or a solution close to the market. And if you feel then there's pressure on the academic side to move faster than they can or are capable of, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think that has to be discussed at the start of the projects, and that comes also along with this effective planning and having those good meetings to begin with to give those expectations of what we see through industry and from the academic perspective as well, and their expectations of the project and what the aims and the goals are. But obviously with science it doesn't always go as planned, and as a company I think we recognize that a lot of projects that we start within research and development don't make it to a product. So we're fully aware that not everything ends in a nice vaccine or so I think we do as a research and development department have that understanding.
And how do you communicate that to your executive management? So look, this project is failed, but can we salvage the knowledge, or can we salvage the partnership in a different way?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So often when you start a collaboration and you start a project, if it doesn't go in the direction you're expecting it to, sometimes it can lead into a different project. So, and you also have that nice new network and that collaboration, so you can set up new projects within different areas. So that's good. But I think also the higher management also have an understanding that there has to be no-go decisions, because you just can't keep going along with a project that it's not going to end in a good product. So and
which goes back to the comment many of you made, but also Eduardo, about what are the expectations and how do you communicate about those expectations and where is the value. I was interested to, you mentioned also that you can use the value in different ways, for example, as a research tool or for teaching, not to make the same mistakes again. Could you dwell a little bit more on that? Because I see two questions in the chat box relating to that.
Sure. So Beth is absolutely right when she said that upper management, I think they already have a mindset that allows us to, we don't need to spend a lot of time explaining that research sometimes fails or doesn't lead to the results that we were expecting. And for me, I think is making sure that we understand what are all the possible deliverables of a research collaboration. So it's not just a product candidate. It can be a specific disease model that we're developing. It can be an assay. Sometimes it is, the knowledge, the fundamental knowledge, like Beth also mentioned, that we need to understand a specific disease pathway or a mode of action of a specific compound. All of that is very valuable and sometimes intangible as well, and we recognize that. And I think we appreciate that as positive results, even if there isn't necessarily a product in the end of the collaboration. Now, how do we make sure that those things are accounted for, and how do we make sure that we communicate that to upper management? And I'll quote Beth again, having go no go decision gates where we have the opportunity to review what has been done so far, what results we have generated, and have the chance to either stop a collaboration if it's just not working, or continue and take a different route if needed. I think those are the risk mitigating steps that we need to take, and management appreciates seeing that in a collaboration. And the second thing we always do, and any project manager does, is having a lessons learned slide or a sheet by the end of each project, and saying, well, these are the things that we learned across, during the collaboration, and that we can change in our process moving forward to avoid those mistakes, or maybe improve our process a little bit. So those are some of the ways that we try to make sure that we communicate the intangible gains with the collaboration as well.
That's very valuable, and it also explains from how do you explain the value to decision makers above you, or to investors. If you're working in a small pharma or biotech company and you attract further private investment beyond startup money, you need to come up with a convincing story. And they need to see where's the risk and is there a balance with the value that we create. Not only the monetary value, but more and more investors are also interested in social impact. And that leads to me to another question, which I would like to ask all three of you subsequently, maybe starting with Eduardo in this case. If you think of other stakeholders that are really essential to assess social impact beyond the monetary value of a product or a solution. I know you have a background in also in regulatory affairs and marketing, so I think you're well placed to see from, okay, how can you increase and how can you communicate about the social impact value?
I see. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't think I have the answer to that, Frank, to be honest. Yeah. But I think we are, at least we're evolving to have those conversations instead of just purely financial aspects of a collaboration. I think that, and we have actually many examples of collaborations where we didn't see, let's say, the large financial impact that we wanted, but there was a social or a strategic component to this collaboration that was also valuable. And it's hard to put numbers and associate numbers to those things. Like we have, for example, products or solutions that we provide that they can increase sales of other products, and we could use that as maybe a proxy to the financial value. Sometimes we try
Like
to do
companion
that.
diagnostics, for example.
Sometimes we try to do that, but I think it's not always straightforward to also do that and use, increase sales of other products. That sometimes can be done, sometimes it can't. In my opinion, the most important aspect is a change. So I think management understands that customers, they require other things like sustainability, for example, and companies are very open and willing to adopt those practices as well. So if we can show that there is a social impact or a sustainability impact to what we're doing, that is also already seen. We don't need to necessarily put a number next to it. I think it is already recognized as a value by stakeholders.
I can think, for example, arguments of, okay, product X is fighting an infectious disease in cows in Africa. It's a common parasite, infectious disease, and that the sales figures is one monetary output. But how many farmers are now having a sustainable livelihood, can survive and send their children to school? That is a social impact.
Absolutely.
And that goes far beyond the sales of the product. That leads me to another aspect of the same question. If you think of bringing products to Africa, to developing countries across the world, it reflects on the access to the product, the distribution, the availability to it, and the affordability. You see with the COVID vaccines, one example, of course, people can't afford $10 to $40 a shot in Africa. Who is paying for this? How is this being reimbursed or supported, and how are price negotiations taken out before you finish your product development? Because otherwise you might develop a product that doesn't reach the scope in the market that you might need. Academia is very well placed to do that background research in the communities of the end customers. And I'm looking at Virginia here. I know you have a lab background and a product development background, but your fellow academics in the Bloomsbury set, like SAWS, like London School of Academic and the London School of Tropical Medicine, they have a lot of knowledge and expertise on what is needed in the communities on the social aspect, and how do you convince end customers? How do you address their needs, and how do you convince them to adopt a new product or a new practice?
Well, I think our particular project, it was more a bit far still for the impact, but I know some other projects on the Bloomsbury set in collaboration with this London school. They focus a lot on that too, in looking at this, the translational research, doing a bit of research on what's the need or what was the change after having incorporated something. So I think social science and experts, that's why I think this include this SOAS or London School of Economics, because then they can give you that aspect. If you're in a project that is more developed or already in place, how to get that feedback.
It's probably easier as an academic to initiate those bilateral, multidisciplinary inputs done in a company whose purpose is product development and making sure that this is advanced.
I think, the RVC, for example, there's all these people working in epidemiology, and that's very good to collaborate with them, just getting a different angle of what really, like the whole picture of how the parasites affect, or the pathogens are affecting in one area, in diseases. So,
and having discussions with government to give market authorizations, for example. I'm thinking of our work in Africa, in Uganda, where we initiated first market research on what are the needs and the challenges in the communities that we serve. And second, got the full feedback and support from the ministries, Ministry of Health in our case, to make sure that we are allowed into the market, and not to get a monopoly, but to get their full support. And that opens a lot of doors. From an academic side, it's easier to initiate discussions with ministry than if a company sits on the table. So building those relationships can open doors for industry partners later as well.
And for funding agencies as well, right, Frank? So if we think about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and some of the governmental agencies also providing funding, I think that the social aspect and the impact that we can have with a specific technology, they are also excellent arguments for requesting funding, and that can come either from a university or the industry. It doesn't really matter. Having both together actually benefits these kinds of grant applications, because then we can make sure that we have both the highest, the top-notch universities working on a solution that then can be used by the industry to actually reach those markets and make sure that they also get the solutions in their daily lives. So we should also consider that social knowledge and understanding the needs of local communities that we might not be so closely related from a commercial perspective. This is the kind of knowledge that can be the yes or no to getting a specific grant in the end of the day.
But it also could help with your marketing strategy. Mm-hmm. If you know that a certain market share or market segment is easier accessible to demonstrate what is the value in the society, because the relationships are there already, that helps. Mm-hmm. Coming in cold with a new technology, however good it might be, is sometimes very hard. Especially with farmers, my experience is they're quite conservative and very difficult and resistant to change their normal habits and their normal products, and you come with something new. Mm-hmm. You need first to have that trust. They need to feel the benefit themselves before they buy something new, if they can. I think we're very close to the end of the session, so I would like to make a roundtable in lessons learned and recommendations. Can I start with Virginia, please? What would your recommendations be towards building long-term relationships with industry and other stakeholders?
Yeah, I think we more or less in our talk showed what we have learned. I think it's been quite positive. So there's still things to improve. It's not something I would say I will do it completely different. I think what is very important is, as we said, being very clear on what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it, timelines. I think there was a question in the chat saying about how to arrange in academia these projects when you're teaching to and things. So you have to be very realistic to yourself, saying how much time you can invest on a project, how much staff you can recruit for it or not. So to set the timeline, so being very realistic, then you can be like the company can trust you. Sometimes you really need to spend time on work on a very good design of the project. And that's one thing for continuity, seeing that things are working, they can trust you, that you can deliver what you say you're going to deliver, or having backup plans and obviously be clear about which things you think could fail. You don't expect, but they could fail, be clear. Yeah, I think that's also is important, as I mentioned, a problem to solve. So in the area we work, there will always be issues. There will always infectious disease will always appear or get worse with new regulations and removing antibiotics, so things like that. There's emerging diseases again. So I think that if the communication work and you have a kind of constant problem there, that can just provide a continuous relationship. Because we are actually talking with Beth and other people in her company, like other areas that it could be interesting thinking and collaborate. So. And one more thing I want to tell you is important, this type of Bloomsbury-set initiatives in which is kind of funding, making industrial partners and university going together because they take the risk for the companies. I think in terms of what you mentioned before of something fail, if it's not that much high investment from a company will be more keen on getting into it, I guess. If things work well, then everybody will benefit. So I think that's good to find sources of funding, not just all coming from the company, to being able to establish this relationship. Yeah.
And perhaps take into the feedback on feasibility of product development early into the product discovery as well. I've seen a lot of projects where from academia, then something is developed, and then if you talk to industry partner, they said, no, can't be scaled up. It's very nice. We can do 5-liter productions in a laboratory scale, but this will never work at 2,000 liters. End of story. So having that feedback early, or another example with COVID, you develop a vaccine that needs to be transported and refrigerated frozen at -80. that is extremely hard in Africa.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
taking those conditions into the early discovery phase can divert your research into the right direction. Beth, same question. What would be your lessons learned and recommendations?
So I think, with the collaboration, I think starting with a good plan is essential, and it's got to be a realistic plan. So you have to be realistic that things may not go as you want them to, as you expect, and so you need to be prepared for that. Maybe have different workarounds, and so you can both get something out of the project. And I think openness is also a very important part of collaboration. You need to be open with each other so you can feel that you're able to have good discussions about what's working, what's not working, and that flexibility. So you really need that flexibility within timelines, flexibility in understanding each other's needs and from the project and what you both want out of the project, I think.
Thank you, Beth. And then I see Eduardo nodding already, so you can close down with your lessons learned and recommendations. Yeah.
I agree with everything Virginia and Beth said. I also think, just to complement, I would say involve legal and the business development teams early on. Make sure that they have time also to understand what the collaboration is about, and they can draft a contract that reflects what the collaboration is supposed to be, rather than be fighting over nitty-gritty details in a contract that don't really reflect the what the partners want to achieve. So make sure that you add them to the conversation early on. I would also say when approaching an industrial partner with an idea, try to get some sense of what they want to hear. And I think the industry in general has been or more open, at least, than in the past, to share more about what is the product profile that we would like to see in a specific area, or what is our perception of a market size. And we have been trying to be, at least we are trying to be more open in sharing this kinds of information, especially with universities that have already a strategic collaboration with. So again, making those strategic collaborations and sharing knowledge more freely, I think they are helpful for both partners, so they understand not only from a physical technology feasibility point of view, like you mentioned, Frank, with the scale up example, but also from sometimes it's not just about the technology itself, but also what the customer expects to get with that technology. So sometimes we're measuring things that are super interesting from a research perspective, but they don't really answer the questions that marketeers will make later on. So can this product really prevent certain disease? Can it really deliver this specific claim or aspect that the customer cares about? So making sure that we answer first those important questions, and then we can expand the research to maybe understanding the peripheries and the other questions that naturally come up during a collaboration. And the don'ts, if I may also make an attempt there of the things that we should not do. I think from our perspective, one of the things that definitely doesn't work for us is presenting an opportunity to Eduardo and then presenting to Frank, and let's say we're all in the same company, trying to enter the company through different doors. We do have different doors that you can access a company, but they all connect to the same hallway. So we will know if you attempted already, because we are really collaborating internally to assess an opportunity. So I would say that more and more it's not fruitful to try and access a company through a different door or window, because they will know. And if one person already evaluated, it means that they already took into consideration all the aspects that anybody else would typically. And another thing that is a little difficult to deal with is when a person approaches you and they say, I have this brilliant idea, it will revolutionize the field, but I cannot share anything without a confidentiality agreement. That stops the conversation because we have legal obligations when it comes to confidentiality. We cannot just sign confidentiality agreements anytime we want. Sometimes we already have a confidentiality obligation with another university or another partner. So understanding at least the basics about a technology or a know-how that you want to transfer is I'd say the key. If you want to start a collaboration and a conversation, you need to be able to share.
That leads back to a word that came in all your presentations, trust. If you're honest and open on the expectations, communication is the old cliche, but that is building partnerships and maintaining sustainability in there. I think that's a good way of closing this panel. So I just want to remind you that tomorrow there's another session 3 on the Bloomsbury SET conference on delivering large-scale knowledge exchange programs. So please log in there and see the last part of this exciting conference. And thank you very much for attending this session.
Thank you.
Thank you.